In October 2016, Kim Kardashian was robbed in an exclusive Paris hotel, with the gunman making off with millions of pounds worth of jewellery. Now, almost a decade on, a group known as the Grandpa Robbers are finally going on trial for the crime. So will Kim testify? And why has it even gone to court, given one of the men accused released a book entitled I Kidnapped Kim Kardashian? I'm Lucy Watson, and this is what you need to know about the Kim K trial. Well, I am joined by our entertainment reporter, Rishi Davda. Rishi, of course you're all over this case. And I won't lie, I'm pretty excited to talk to you about this. In fact, I'm already on the edge of my seat. I've got my mug full of caffeine because I'm pretty focused on picking up every little detail that you've got, because I know you've got plenty. I'd totally forgotten about this heist, to be honest. 9 years is a long time, even though it was dramatic at the time, in all the headlines, all the papers, all on television. Just remind us what exactly happened to Kim.
So if we go back to October 2016, it was Paris Fashion Week. Kim was in the city with her sister Courtney and some friends and kind of a whole entourage, which is often how they travel around the world. She was staying in these discreet luxury apartments, which some call the No Address Hotel or the No Name Hotel. They're frequented by the likes of Leonardo DiCaprio, Jay-Z and Beyonce, Madonna. Realistically, just a place to stay if you want to keep a low profile while in Paris. The Sky penthouse at these luxury apartments, which is the room where Kim was staying, at the moment goes for about £13,000 per night. But I was in Paris last week and walked past the hotel, and it's quite inconspicuous. You could very easily walk past it. There's an optician's right next door. It's not like some of the fancy, glitzy Ritz Savoy you might expect to see. It's really quite understated, and I think that's why the A-listers like going there. So it was the morning of the 3rd of October, about 2:30 in the morning. A number of men dressed as police broke into Kim's room. They used the concierge as what he called a human key. So they handcuffed him at gunpoint and took him up to the room and said, "Let us in."
A human key?
A human
That's
key.
the actual terminology.
That's how it was described by his lawyer. And they gained access with the concierge, and they were yelling, "Where is the rapper's wife?" Now, at the time, she was married to Kanye West. At a later date, she spoke about actually using Snapchat on that evening, posting to all her followers saying, "I'm here by myself, everyone else has gone out." And she said it was that, and also previous posts kind of not necessarily flaunting her wealth, but showing off what she was doing, where she was going, the kind of diamonds she was wearing, that may have provided what she called a window of opportunity. So allegedly, these gunmen grabbed her, tied her up with plastic cables and put a tape over her mouth and demanded her engagement ring and money, and then locked her in the bathroom. They got away with about £8 million worth of jewellery. And once the robbers left, Kim managed to free herself. She spoke to detectives, got help, and very quickly flew back to the US on a private jet.
You mentioned at the very beginning, this is where they stay with their whole entourage. So where were they? Where was the entourage? Where was the security?
So she had a security guard known by the name of Pascal Duvier, and he had gone out for the night with her sister Courtney and other members of the entourage. They'd gone on a night out. So I guess the presumption was it makes more sense for him to be with them when they're out in public and might meet fans or people trying to cause problems. Little did they know this robbery was going to take place. Interestingly, Duvier and the security company he worked for were sued by the insurance company who had insured all the jewels that Kim had with her. That case was settled out of court. Yeah, there were a few issues with the hotel, reportedly a broken intercom system and some locks that weren't quite in top shape that were flagged up as part of that. That was all settled outside of court, but she was left by herself, which must be very rare for someone of her status, wealth, potential vulnerability, that she would be by herself. Add on top of that she was posting about the fact that she was by herself. The alleged robbers had been scoping out for a little while the possibility of this rapper's wife. All of the lawyers I've spoken to who represent those defendants say they didn't even know who she was.
I was going to say, they didn't know. They didn't even know
who she was.
Just knew that she was a wealthy lady inside this building.
That might be in part to do with their age, in that 5 of the 10...
We'll come to that. We'll come to the age.
They're a little bit older, some of the defendants, so maybe not... They weren't necessarily keeping up with the Kardashians and their goings-on, so I think potentially that was why it was happening. But they did know that there was this woman coming to Paris for Fashion Week who was posting photos with very expensive diamonds.
So Rishi, if they knew that this very wealthy lady was coming to Paris for Fashion Week to stay in this place. Now, I lived in Paris in my early 20s, and the fancy hotels, the Ritz, for example, everyone knows is in Place de la Concorde. Georges Cinque's
Mm.
another really fancy place, and I think that's on Champs-Elysees. This maintains that it's very discreet and nobody knows where it is. Clearly, people do
Mm.
know about this hotel.
Yeah.
We're talking about it now, but
Yes.
prior to this, people knew. So was this an inside job or?
There were elements of
Okay.
inside jobness, which is a phrase that I'm
That's a
going to
new
coin
word.
from now
A new
on.
word for us.
So interestingly, one person who was accused of being involved, but it's become very clear wasn't involved, was the concierge at the hotel the night the robbery took place, a man by the name of Abdurrahman Watiki, who was an Algerian PhD student who used to do night shifts working at the hotel, and he was the man used as the human key. And people thought he must have been in on it. How did they get in? But I mean, he was tied up at gunpoint and basically used as a translator to demand money and engagement ring. He wasn't involved. However, there were others who were on trial, people involved with the transportation of the Kardashians around Paris from transport companies that had been used previously by the family during their visits to Europe, passing information to other people here and there as to where she was going to be staying, what was going to be going on. One of the problems was actually, I was watching some video footage of Kanye West and Kim Kardashian when they visited in 2014 to Paris. And, with social media and paparazzi, actually, this hotel is supposedly very private. But the big red door that lets you into it is plastered everywhere
Mm-hmm.
and gets loads and loads of views, and they pull their car into it. So actually, through a little bit of online sleuthing, you can find out the address of the no address hotel.
So, I mean, I know there were millions of pounds worth
Mm.
of jewellery stolen. What exactly was taken?
So we were about the £8 million mark for the jewellery that was stolen, and that included a £4 million engagement ring that was given to Kim
That is
Kardashian
some rock.
by Kanye West, and it was all over her social media post engagement. That kind of glitter is what drew some of the people in, thinking, oh, we go and visit Kim. She never doesn't have this on. It's there for the taking. 2 Cartier diamond bracelets, some gold necklaces, a Rolex. I was reading through the list, about 20 items in total. Kim had said it was kept in a large Louis Vuitton jewellery box, which they took as they left. And so there were a number of items there. Didn't necessarily have much sentimental value to her,
Not even the engagement ring.
apart
Well,
from
not
the
now.
engagement. Well, so apart from the engagement ring, but she has said, it's all material things. But to be treated in such a way, I can't imagine going through that experience. It sounds absolutely horrible. And I think being a reality star and having all the fans that she does, but also the critics, as is the nature of being in the public spotlight, I think people were sometimes a little bit harsh on the idea of, well, she was showing off all her diamonds. Yes, but she's still a mother of 2 who was allegedly robbed at gunpoint. Nobody deserves to go through that. And fear exists whether you are wearing a £50 watch and someone comes and points a knife at you or points a gun at you and asks for it, or if you've got millions of pounds worth of jewellery. No one wants to be, subjected to
Yeah.
something like that.
And has any of this been found, recovered? They got it back at all?
Just one piece.
One.
And this is where it becomes like a little bit slapstick in the way that the robbers left and they dropped a diamond encrusted cross.
I mean, this is
on the
Hollywood
floor.
blockbuster to me in
Yeah.
terms of, all the material, the information, the kind of robbers, the level of money. I mean, it's, it's got movie written all over it, but I interrupted you there.
No,
Go
no,
on.
I'm sure the rights have been attributed somewhere, and I think post-case we might see something brought out. They recovered this cross, which was dropped. Interestingly, the robbers fled on foot.
Oh, so they dropped it and then just left it, scarpered?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean, by comparison, it was worth less than everything else they had, but they fled on foot and by bicycle. As for the gold, the presumption is that the gold items would have been melted down
Yeah.
and sold. The engagement ring is so well known. Not only had it been on Kim's social media, it was all over the world media once the robbery had taken place. So it's difficult to sell something like that on an open market. There are 2 theories out there. One is that it's in someone's sock drawer somewhere because it's just too shiny and too dangerous to try and sell it. Or it's been sold on the black market and some slightly unsavory character loves the idea of having Kim Kardashian's engagement ring that was stolen from her and has given it to his wife.
And she's perhaps none the wiser.
Yeah, well, or again, it's one of those families where they just like being involved in that kind of criminal underworld. Nothing would surprise me.
But this happened nearly a decade ago now. What, 9 years ago, 2016? Why has it taken so long to get to court?
And it's not like they were only arrested recently. Actually, many of the arrests happened in
Oh
2017.
yeah, how quickly were they caught and found?
I mean, the start of 2017, there was
Oh, right.
a number of the arrests were made, and they spent a little bit of time in prison. So the reason why it's taken so long, firstly, there were other high-profile cases in France, some of which were terrorism-related, so kind of took precedence over this case, and they wanted to give it the due care and attention it deserved at the highest court, but other cases were very much under public scrutiny at the time. Secondly, pandemic. This happened in 2016.
Oh, okay.
It was very easy to just say, we will get to this, we're building a case, but there's a bigger issue in the world right now. But an interesting part of it was that the defendants weren't in prison. They spent a little bit of time in prison, some more than others, but were let out for a number of reasons, including health reasons. So none of them were sat there awaiting trial. And that again has everybody going, well, we're not restricting somebody's liberty at the moment. Let's get this right. Let's take a little bit longer to do it. So all those kind of three elements together meant that it's taken about, we're just under 9 years for this to go to trial.
2016, Rishi, you'd barely been on television, had you? You were fresh out of university.
Yeah, it was just a bright-eyed narcissist hoping to make his way onto the big screen.
Now, in the intro, I said that some of the accused, they've actually already admitted being part and parcel of this. One of them's written a book. Why even have a trial if they're so comfortable with the fact, I was involved?
Yeah, so this kind of adds into the Hollywood, almost like unbelievable element of the story. So there were 12 defendants on the case initially. One passed away, another one is in a medical situation, which means that they cannot be tried in the same way. So we've got 10. Of those 10, 5 are being tried for very serious crimes. You've got armed robbery and kidnapping. The other 5 are basically being charged with complicity or possession of an illegal weapon. But let's stick with the 5 who are up for the more serious charges. Of those 5, we'll focus on 2. Omar Kadesh and Yunus Abbas. Omar is known in the French press as Old Omar, and he has previously admitted wrongdoing.
They've already been caricatured almost, haven't they?
Yes. Yeah, there's a weird affinity with them as like these older French statesmen who have been involved in this. Omar has admitted involvement. He tried to write a letter to Kim Kardashian, a sort of apology, but you can't just send a letter to your victim, so I think it ended up with a lawyer somewhere. He is part of this trial basically trying to downplay his involvement because he's up for very serious charges. One legal expert I was speaking to said that the more serious charges, if found guilty, could carry anything from 10 years to the rest of your life in prison. So he's trying to downplay his involvement. There are allegations that Omar was the ringleader.
Right.
His lawyer says, no, he definitely wasn't the ringleader. But I think that's part of the reason why he is involved in this case is saying, yes, I was involved, but it wasn't to the extent to which maybe you think. He is also going through some health issues, and that's one of the reasons as to why his lawyer, Chloe Arnaud, who I spoke to, said that he shouldn't really be going back to prison. She doesn't think it's beneficial. We can have a listen to what she had to say.
The key question that we have to ask ourselves is, of course, what is done is serious. It's not a problem, and it's not a question. But how prison can be useful to society today for someone with that profile? I mean, who hasn't reoffended in the 5 years that he's been free, who is aged because he's 70, who has really health problem, a really big health problem, and what's the point?
So that's Omar's lawyer, Chloe Arnaud. The other person who has admitted some level of involvement is a man by the name of Yunus Abbas. He wrote and published a book called I Kidnapped Kim Kardashian. There's not really any coming back from that in terms of going to trial. You can't say I did it and then sell a book and then go to trial and go, no, actually I didn't do it.
This is crackers. I mean, he makes loads of money in the meantime whilst he's just waiting to go to trial.
He did a small press tour around it, and there's loads of photos of him holding up this book. And it's peculiar. Again, he's another one who is involved in this trial
Peculiar is one word for it.
Yeah, that's the word that you're probably allowed to say on air. He's at trial trying to downplay his involvement, saying, I've partially accepted these sorts of allegations. Yes, I was involved in this, but not the more
Right.
serious parts of it. So I guess just trying to get a reduced sentence. The other 8 involved have remained tight-lipped, and everyone's got a different role to play. So all the testimony that's been given is focused on, well, you gave this piece of information to the group, or you were in charge of getting the guns, or you kept lookout, or you were the one who tied up Kim Kardashian.
They were called, or they are called, the grandpa robbers.
So 5 of the 10 people involved in, or allegedly involved in, the robbery were aged between 60 and 72 when the robbery took place. There's this conflicted view on the whole process, in that the local French media seem to have almost not fun with it, but seem to be treating it in a little bit more of a relaxed way, with the grandpa robbers and calling him Old Omar, and there's a kind of a familiar nature to the whole thing, whereas it was a really horrible situation.
Yeah.
I wonder if, as time has gone on, it feels like the severity has decreased. When it happened, it was terrible, but as years have passed, maybe it's not been treated with the same level of seriousness across the board. And I think now, hearing about what's happened, going into all that detail again, I think has drawn people to go, oh, actually, this was really, really terrible, and it sounds like it was a traumatic experience
And absolutely
for Kim.
terrifying for Kim Kardashian. Are we expected to see her? Is she going to come to Paris for any part of this trial?
Yes. Yeah. It was
That'll be a big day.
One of the big questions was, will she testify? And I mean, I think it would have been quite easy to send a statement from the US and have a lawyer read it out on court, but she's expected to be in court on the 13th of May is the day that we've been given. Obviously, with court
Have you
cases,
booked your
things can
lawyers,
always can always move. I have arranged travel to go out there. It's going to be,
Huge
a
day.
big day. Had she kind of come to some
What's
level
she said
of
up
peace
to
about
this
the whole
point?
thing?
Has she-
She's spoken quite openly. I mean, in Keeping Up the Kardashians, she sat with her sisters and kind of went through what had happened, and said there was a real fear she felt when she realized something wasn't right, and she was only wearing a dressing gown and nothing else, and that added another element of
Pure terror.
what potentially could happen. She feared she would die. She didn't know the 911 equivalent in France. So she has spoken about it, and she already had a couple of children at the time. So it can't have been an easy situation. She spoke about it very tearfully the first few times, but I think there's a resilience that's built up within her. I don't know exactly what it is. We can only really think about what she would want out of this.
Yeah.
Does she want a public apology? Does she want the perpetrators to be in prison for the rest of their life? Does she just want the opportunity to, give that kind of victim statement and speak about what it was she went through and the damage they inflicted upon her? She gave a speech at a forum and said it was a lesson to her not to post everything that she had, everything she was doing, the location in which she was going to be, and realize that even though she and her fans may have purely positive intentions, maybe not everybody does. And it was a wake-up call to be a little bit more careful.
How long is this whole case expected to last, the trial?
So running to about May the 23rd, which would be a month in total from when it started. There's lots of kind of minute details to go into. There is a portion of the case where they're going to go through what was about 10 minutes of an event, second by second, minute by minute. This happened, and this happened, and this happened.
I am riveted. How can viewers, listeners kind of keep up to date with this? So what are you doing?
We will be regularly posting things on the ITV News website. There will be pieces going into the bulletins on the significant days, so on our conventional lunch, evening, and news at 10 programs, and the ITV News social media channels will be picking up on every kind of small movement. I think the biggest hit of the whole case will be seeing Kim walk through those court corridors.
And that's May the 13th.
We expect May the 13th.
Right. Rishi, thank you very, very much indeed. Or you can watch all our latest quick news briefings on YouTube, ITVX, or Spotify to find out what you need to know about a range of headline topics. And subscribe on any podcast platform to ensure you never miss an episode. Until the next time, thank you for joining us.